The pruning shears of revision, as Neville Goddard calls it, that is the topic of today's discussion. Guys, welcome back to Hypnovision Studios. I am your host, Nicholas. Imagine if you could change the past, not by altering events, but by shifting your perception. What if the version of you who struggled, hesitated, or suffered no longer existed? That's what Neville Goddard calls the pruning shears of revision. And I've been using it in ways never imagined before. Think of it like editing a movie script or rewriting a memory like a digital file. When you revise the past in imagination, the subconscious mind accepts it as real, making it reality. And reality starts to shift accordingly. Instead of being stuck in regret, you overwrite the emotional impact of past experiences and create a new trajectory. So guys, Neville Goddard is a wonderful teacher when it comes to the imagination and when it comes to the power of awareness. So what I've done is tried to incorporate my personal story and how I've been using these things to change my own life. And I thought it would be nice to share it with you guys. If you have been able to catch my last couple videos, I have been really on the topic of imagination itself a lot here lately. Magnetism is another topic that I've really covered. And you can't really talk about imagination without going into spiritual things. They are one and the same. So the idea of revision is not to deny that something happened in the past or to block it out and avoid it like a person with avoidant personality. In fact, the idea of revision is to change the perception. And my friends, perception is the feeling. That's why Neville Goddard calls it the secret. The feeling is secret. I'm not talking about the modern book. I am talking about the feeling inside each individual person that is contained within the human body. That is the secret. And that, my friends, once you start to understand this, you start to realize that other people cannot hide their emotions because you are the reader. You are reading the emotions. And it is thoughts that are filling out the form and the emotion is given it the charge. So our perception is how we are perceiving these combinations of things coming together. So early on, when I started my channel, I've known this concept for probably 2 years now, maybe a little bit longer. It's taken me some time to wrap my head around it because the human condition is deeply ingrained in all of us. There are certain things about our own past that we have accepted as a belief system or accepted as a certain way of being, and it can become deeply ingrained in our being. So revision sometimes takes consistent practice for something to stick. Now, some things are a little bit easier to change. The way you feel about something, maybe somebody offended you or you have a tendency to hold on to things, but the persistence of revision eventually will stick to the reality, and there is no choice but for reality to conform to that itself. So, guys, Romans 12:2 tells us to renew the mind and not conform to the patterns of the outside world. So anything on the outside, right, that is outside of your first person view is the outside world. Now, me and another person or you and somebody else could look at something and say, well, that's a tree. And there is a consensus that there is a tree. That is a tree. But when it comes to behavior and when it comes to perception, sometimes we are in a projector. I wrote in my affirmations one day that the mind is the projector of reality. And it certainly is, because our attention is either externalized or it is internalized, extrovert, introvert, or somewhere in the middle. However, through a series of life happenings and things that we become so involved in the first person experience that we personalize every single thing. And that is partly a piece of that projection. So when it says Think of it like editing a movie script or rewriting the memory like a digital file. So our emotions can be attached to thought processes or experiences. That is the emotional attachment of things. And all of this starts with as early as childbirth. The moment that we start to become aware of our surroundings, whether even as a child we don't know the difference in certain things, we are starting to set patterns within our own being that will carry throughout our lifetime, just like rings on a tree. So the pruning shears of revision is to prune away those dead branches so that new life can come along. If you are a green thumb, you probably understand this concept quite well. When it comes to things like grapevines and different greenery, pruning actually promotes growth because you are no longer supporting things that are dead weight. So in that way, it makes a whole lot of sense. For example, let's say I used to think of myself as someone who struggled to get noticed in content creation. And I actually faced this early on in my channel because it was such a out-of-the-box thing for me to do. It started with doing little short recordings, and those recordings, I allowed myself to become really honest. And if you look back at my playlist, there is a video where I did a comparison of now and then, and I can certainly see the difference because I had taken on such a negative perception to the outside world that I had got to the point where I had idolized often myself. I used to dream about it. I had dreams that would wake me up like night terrors, and all I could think about was how terrible existing in life is with all these weird constructs that are man-made. It almost seems like man is begging for his own torture in some ways. So the idea that we can become so polarized into something, a line of thinking, is when we start to take on all these perceptions of other people and we start to accept those things as who we are, how we behave, walk, talk, and act. Those things start to become baggage if they are negative connotations that we accept about ourselves. So revision is not necessarily to suggest that something didn't happen. However, sometimes revision is just simply adjusting the angle of perception so that you can see a different side of something. But what if I go back and see myself as someone consistently refining my craft, already successful, already having an engaged audience? That subtle shift changes how I show up today. It absolutely does. So if I produce a video and then it doesn't get very many likes or hardly any comments, maybe a negative comment, then my self-confidence might take a hit. And what would happen on the next video? I would probably be overthinking things. I would probably start to self-censor myself out of fear that I might be saying something that is causing this negative type reaction. Or I could go back and say, these are actually lessons that I need to learn something from. And if I can learn and change my perception and stay consistent, then eventually I will master that craft. It takes, 10,000 hours of practice to be considered a master at anything? If you have 365 days in a year and you divide 10,000 by 365, it really doesn't take that much effort on a single day consistently to become a master at anything. And guys, I wholeheartedly swear on that to be true because I have not only done it, but I have experienced it and I have watched it transform in front of my own eyes. So when I hear other people say, I can't, I don't know how, it's not that they can't, it's the no. It's the K-N-O-W. It is not the N-O, no. Those two words sound the same, know and know. Knowledge and know. I do not know how because I don't know the knowledge. I don't know how to apply the knowledge. Well, my friends, I'm here to help the best I can if I can. So please, along the way, make sure you drop comments, likes, and shares and help progress this conversation further. And even if you don't mind sharing some of your stories of how the concept of revision has helped you to change your own self-image, your own self-concept. It is very real when it comes to the imagination, because that is the source of everything. Imagination is pure energy in its purest form. You will hear me say that often. I am a person who's highly imaginative, highly creative, but part of my own lessons over this whole lifetime was to be more bold, be more confident, and not allow others to talk me out of things that I imagine with my imagination. Oh, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Well, yes, I can, because I can see it through my imagination. I know that it's real. I know that I can do it. And the other thing that the Bible tells us, now I'm not going to take you to church on this. I'm not going to go all holy on this, but to test the theory. So again, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the patterns of the outside world, but renew the mind, and then test it to see if it's pleasing with God. So what does that mean, to test it to see if it's pleasing? Well, first, if you have something, an idea in your imagination, and let's say it's a business idea, let's say it's some kind of invention or just something random that comes into your mind, if you don't act on it, then it can never come to fruition. It can never be manifested unless you take action. So sometimes we have to start off in baby steps, and we have to test the theory to see if it's even reasonable, even if it's practical. And then once we know that it is reasonable, it is practical, and that there is something that can be done with this idea, now we can move it forward. Now we can start to bring that into a real manifestation, turn something from an idea into a real business, turn something into an invention. So the idea of imagination, I believe it was Nikola Tesla who was quoted as saying that he used to tweak his inventions through his imagination. He could build the whole thing in his imagination and test things and change things through the imagination before actually inventing something. Now, that says a lot about the power of imagination. So guys, over the past 2.5 years, my journey on YouTube and producing content and writing content and content creation has gone hand in hand with journaling. Not just journaling, but with the release more in a mainstream market of AI, I have coupled that with my journaling, and I have really expanded my mindset to places I've never thought of before. And I'll give you an example. While I was preparing for this video, I was looking in one of my older notebooks, and this was written on 3/3/23. Homework for leveling up. Inner child healing via write it out. So inner child healing, I do believe, is a very real thing, because like I said, everything starts at childhood. The things that we are not really taught, we learn to mimic. And when we learn to mimic things, we don't exactly understand all of the inner workings of things. So when you hear things like narcissist and nearsighted and things like that, sometimes it's not exactly an evil thing or bad thing. Sometimes it is really the application of knowledge versus mimicking or faking it till you make it. Again, nothing wrong with it. But once you become aware, now you have conscious choice to choose. So inner child healing to me was definitely a real thing. As a matter of fact, I asked my youngest daughter to help me to remember how to be a child again. Because as a person myself who I feel like grew up at a young age having to start to take care of myself as early as 10 years old, there were a lot of times where I had to be an adult before it was time for me to be an adult. I had to take on responsibilities. And I was told I was wrong many times, but I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't know any better. So how could I do better? Now that is a slippery slope. That is part of the revision that I'm trying to point out here. Because if I had maintained that mindset that I didn't know any better, then I could have the plausible deniability of being a victim to circumstance. So again, Neville Goddard teaches us that our reality conforms to what we imagine and what we perceive, but we can always revise it because the feeling is the secret. So, heartbreaks, mistakes, things that happened in the past, they have already happened. There is only the present. The future only happens in the present moment. The past can only be remembered in the present moment. So the whole idea of the past and the present converging in the present is definitely true. The other thing that I wrote was to release past trauma through reflection and forgiveness. Now, guys, this is a really important one to me, and I hope it is to you also, to understand that forgiveness is not for the other person. It is for the individual's own benefit. To forgive someone else is to take the burden off of you. And that is one of the hardest things I feel like in the human condition, the human psyche, to let things go. It is so easy to hold a grudge against somebody and then walk around feeling all tense and angry and frustrated about something that somebody said about you or something that somebody did to you. And some people will hold on to these things for a lifetime. And so for me, it definitely was a big thing to go into meditations and write in my notebooks, and I write with different color pens. I question myself. I will ask questions in one color pen and write the answer in a different color pen and allow myself to be honest with myself. How did that make me feel? Should I have been more compassionate to someone over my own actions? And yes, a lot of times you will find that some of the things that we think somebody else is guilty of, we ourselves have done in our own actions. So the forgiveness is much the benefit of the individual person, more so than it is anything else on the outside. Again, the outside patterns. So guys, those are some really interesting points to make when it comes to revision. The other thing is the key, right? I have a key that I've been wearing for almost 2 years now, the key to the universe. It has a heart on it because the heart is the center. I am the way. So Jesus, again, you know, with all the holes in the story of Jesus, I am the way, right? I am self-conscious. I am that I am. It is the I am, the internal self, the inner child, the inner imagination, the I in intuition or I in imagination. I am. So the key is through writing to identify and release. This is very important because identification is how we are perceiving, right? If I identify as a victim, then my story must conform to things confirming that I am playing the role of a victim. That means I would be blamed for things or feel like I should be blamed for things. The victimology of things is very interesting once you go down that rabbit hole and you realize that sometimes it's unaware. Those mimicked patterns that we picked up are playing out through our imagination, playing out through the psyche of ourself, and we are creating conditions that come back to bite us. If you watch the video about Saturn, I talk about the patterns of thoughts and how we can create our own hell on earth. That is literally the identification, because the word identity has the word entity inside of it. And when we identify with something, we take on its attributes, we take on its essence. So early on in my channel, one of the things that I really focused on was the essence of an earth angel. What does it feel like to do things for others and not need the acknowledgement, not need the pat on the back or the admiration or this or that? What does it feel like to just do something out of the kindness of your heart because it makes you feel better? That is the key. If it makes me feel better to do something for somebody else, I'm not doing it for a thank you. I'm not doing it to get a pat on the back. I don't need someone to tell me that I did a good job. However, sometimes it is nice to hear that. Sometimes it is nice to know these things. And it is very appreciative when people do speak up. One of the things that I love about DJing is not the money. It is at the end of the night when people come up and tell me that they enjoyed the music, they enjoyed how the songs fit together and how things flowed. And it is for me confirmation of the time I spent beforehand. Before the gig, I have imagined through the process of the amount of information that I may have before an event. I include that in my imagination. Say I'm going to an event, I'll look ahead of time or maybe even go to the event place and kind of visualize my equipment in the room, visualize people being in the room, visualize people dancing. And I will go home and I will start to put together song list. And when people give me music, I will start to fill in the blanks. I will start to construct through the imagination what the night could be. Now, because of revision, we are allowed to change, right? If our mindset is not fixed, then it is unlimited, which means that we can change on the fly. So the idea to pretend, right? Kids do this very well, pretend. We pre-attend the event. That is what I'm doing when I spend hours before an event at home, going through music, going through making sure that these songs are going to flow together good, or the specific genre that a client may be asking for, making sure that I have the right versions of songs and stuff like that, so that I know that when I get there, if I have to adjust and revise my flow of things, I've got it covered. There's nothing to worry about. And that is very, very interesting, guys. So healing leads to self-love, and self-love changes self-talk. It absolutely does. And as you move through spotting patterns, you can start to break them. The key is when you start to believe. Now, guys, 3-3-23, and it is 3-5-25. So in 2 years, I have created almost 200 some odd plus videos. It has taken a lot of inner courage for some of these videos. My semen retention topics, I gotta be honest with you guys, if I had not took that journey, if I had not took that leap of faith, I would not even have a YouTube channel right now. It was the whole idea of stopping cold turkey for an extended amount of time to know, like, what will that feel like after 2, 3, whatever, how long of not having sex, and then all of a sudden being sexually active again. It is like a complete reset, and it aroused me in such a way that I couldn't stop myself. I just did it. So I see a lot of people in different groups and things. How do you break the habit? How did you do it? Guys, you got to get intentional. That is the other thing with revision and imagination is intention. Intention and attention. They all go hand in hand, right? Attention, intention, imagination, and revision. So it's all connected, guys. When you intend to do something, you will do it. So guys, when you see people say in their talk, I was going to do this, I meant to do that, if you are paying attention to the self-talk of someone else, you could start to hear the past tense that is woven into the present tense of the moment. People who live in the past emotionally always have that emotion weaved in through their present tense talk. So sometimes you can talk to a person and they will never even hear anything that you are saying. They will hear what they want to hear because they are not being present. And that is absolutely a real thing. And as I turn the page, here is some of the writing that is in different color inks. So revision is absolutely one of those tools that can help you change your life. And it does take practice, and it does take being consistent. The science behind revision, The brain does not distinguish between what is real and what are imagined events. Rehearsing a new story rewrites neural pathways. Those are those little firing neurons that are shooting all around your brain all the time, 24/7. So when you start to change your self-story through the power of I am, right? I was going to do this, or I am going to do this. I will do this. It really matters when it comes to our self-talk or internal dialogue. So let me do this right quick. If you start to write on a notebook paper, your mouth is not moving, but you hear the story in your head. Whose voice is that you are hearing as you write? Your hand is not speaking. It is writing the words that are being heard inside of your mind. But wait a minute. How can you hear something in your mind if it's not audible and your ears are not picking it up, but you can still hear it? So that tells us the inside voice and the outside voice, right? So when someone is not very consciously aware of the distinguished aspect of the inside-outside, they are likely fully externalized with their attention. They are reactive emotionally to the world outside. And this does go back to the childhood growth, right? So they say that like a percentage of the population does not even realize they have an internal monologue. And I found that very interesting because the voices in my head sometimes, they do chatter a lot. So learning to observe and not react or judge my own thoughts has definitely allowed me to empty out a mind full of things so it could have room, like the pruning shears for new growth. Very interesting, guys. So when we start to tell a new story, we start to change the feeling. And when we change the feeling, that is confirmation that the perception is changing, right? If we were to take a color chart of chakras or even a rainbow, and we would fill in emotions, right? Purple being the highest. It is the, in the terms of spirituality, that is the highest form. And we go all the way down the color scale till we get lower and lower to a more dense emotion. Anger oftentimes is depicted as red. Anger, just like a bull charging at a matador. Is it a matador? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. When he's holding a little red flag and the bull charges after him. So red really does play a role on the subconscious. And guys, look it up. You'll find out that it's true. Red has something to do with the subconscious mind. It is something there for you to check into. When you revise your past, your emotional response changes. And since emotions drive actions, your reality will follow. So when you revise your past, your emotional response changes. If you are no longer holding a grudge about something, then you feel indifferent about something that happened in the past. And perhaps when you are no longer holding a grudge or upset about it, maybe now you can see the lesson that was there. That is part of the perception change that happens with the identity shift. So another way that you can do a practical exercise is step 1, to identify a moment that brings a negative emotion. So internally, what is triggering me? Sometimes it's easier to just argue with somebody than it is to stop and self-reflect, is what I'm trying to say. But if you stop and self-reflect and you say, why is this triggering me so much? Why is this upsetting me so much? Is it me? Is there something that internally is just striking a bad vibe with me? So the next step would be to close your eyes and imagine it differently. Or you could take a few deep breaths. Now, last year I spoke about pretending I was blind, right? Because I went through this whole step through my imagination. What does a blind person see? If we were able to form mental pictures in our mind and they have no perception visually, like physical vision of the outside world, then they must have honed their auditory senses to such a high degree that they can build these complex images in their mind just by hearing. So through meditation, through my imagination, I wondered that, like, what is that like? So when I would listen to people Even though my eyes are working, I assume in the back of my head to heighten my auditory senses and pretend as if I am blind. So, taking deep breaths and allow yourself to release whatever tension is being stirred in the moment. As you do so, you can close your eyes and imagine it different, not as it was, but as you wish it had happened. Repeat it nightly. Then watch how life starts to shift. So repeating it nightly would be being consistent and intentional about something. I do write every single day. Now, I don't write as much as I did in the beginning. I have been able to stay on the writing, and I do find it very helpful for keeping myself on track. But the more practice that you do, the easier the flow of things start to happen. So your past does not define you. Your awareness does. When you become aware, you have the conscious choice to choose differently. I am not what someone else says I am. I am who I say I am. And that makes a big difference, guys. So the mimicking parts that we pick up from the outside world, the mindful or mindful of stuff from the outside world, sometimes we have to, like a whiteboard, just wipe it all away and start fresh. How do I ideally want to see myself? And we have to feel it. It is not so much about thinking it as it is the feeling. So it is secret to others, but it is real to you on the inside. And if you can get into those higher vibrations and allow yourself to feel it fully inside, that emotion will start to carry out the actions. It will start to change how you perceive those thought patterns. And the ones that are no longer in alignment with yourself will start to fall away. Things that used to trigger me in the past or aggravate me or annoy me no longer annoy me to the same level. Do I still get annoyed about things sometimes? Yes, I do. Do I still feel anxious about things at times? Yes, of course I do. I'm human, just like you, just like anybody else. We are all human. We all have emotions. So to deny yourself the emotion that is inside of you and then project it out into the outside world and put it onto someone else is a part of the life experience that we all must learn to come to terms with. And we are not a victim. We are the creator of our reality. So when we understand that the self-talk is creating the self-story, and changing the self-talk changes our self-perception. That is why writing and revision is such a powerful tool for manifesting. And I stand by this, guys. I really do. It has changed my life in ways that I could never have imagined in the past. I am not what the rumors that people have said about me were. Sure, I've done things that I wish I had never done or I was embarrassed about. But those things taught me things. They were valuable life lessons. And when I stopped trying to defend myself and just accept certain things, I was able to learn those lessons. And those lessons became blessings. And those blessings are the reasons that I am here today, sharing these ideas and thoughts with you guys. So let me know in the comments, have you ever tried revision? Would you ever try it for just a few days? Is there something about yourself that you really would love to change, but maybe you don't know how to reword things or rework things on the inside? Drop a comment. You know, I've said this before, I'm willing to help anybody who's willing to help themselves. It is those that you try to help that don't really want your help. They will come up with another excuse. And then you try to solve that problem for that excuse, and then they have another excuse, and another excuse, and another excuse. Those are the times where, in our own individual first-person view, that we have to learn to let certain things go. If someone does not want to help themselves, you cannot do it for them. Now, there are people that you love. There are people in your family. There are people who are close to you that you will never give up on. I get that. There's nothing wrong with it. But what I'm trying to say is we cannot enable habits and patterns in other people if they are not willing to at least accept the constructive criticism. Because when it comes to patterns, there's either destructive patterns or constructive patterns. There are expanding patterns or contracting patterns. So once you become aware, self-aware of what you are creating, just as I become self-aware of what I am creating through my own imagination, again, I gain the conscious choice to choose differently, to choose to feel differently about something or to feel indifferent about it. One way or the other, I don't feel good or bad. A tree is a tree. You know, it doesn't make me feel one way or the other. So the personal attachment of emotion internally to an external object is where we find ourselves at times with our attention too externalized, too much in the material world, too much physical attachment with emotion to physical things. And this definitely does play out when it comes to relations with other people. Sometimes we depend on somebody else to make us happy. And when we get to a point where that becomes excessive, even if it's unintentional, that becomes an emotional attachment to another person. And in the long run, those can have unintended consequences that are not favorable for either party. And that is those times when the revision is a very great tool to be implemented and to changing how you feel about the past, how you feel about certain things. So guys, I am very grateful to be able to share these things with you. And I'm very grateful to have had all the comments and likes and shares recently. You guys really have been amazing. And I must say that YouTube itself, the platform itself, for me has been a wonderful, wonderful teacher over my life, because there are so many other creators. If you're watching and you're a creator, thank you. I really appreciate it, because there's a lot of do-it-yourself videos out there. My whole basement, I've done a remodel on my whole basement off of watching YouTube videos. I have a laptop in the other room that I took apart and put back together off of a DIY video. Just about anything that I want to do, I will always look on YouTube to see if somebody's got a how-to video. So YouTube is really like the you in the university, the you and I in the universe of things. So with that, guys, I will see you on the next one. And thank you so much for everything. And always remember that you have the power to choose, not anyone else. You get to choose the internal feeling. You get to choose the internal stories that you are telling yourself. And I will see you on the next one.